Humanity has hundreds of stories regarding the creation of the universe, the history of the planet, and the birth of mankind. Some of these stories are oral traditions and are handed down to subsequent generations in the form of songs and folklore. Other civilizations managed to record these tales in writing, forming the many religions and mythologies that we know today. Giving the subject of religion and mythology no more than a cursory glance, First may be forgiven for believing that these myths of history and creation are the misguided accounts of an ignorant and superstitious people. Truly, the stories of myth are easy to dismiss. Modern man has, for the most part, accepted the assertions of psychologists regarding these ancient tales, the gatekeepers of psychology. Men like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung have suggested that the stories told by ancient man are no more than the symbolic retellings of a conflict occurring in the psyche of the individual. They reasoned that the gods of ancient man are no more than different aspects of the self. For example, each mythology seems to have at least one good god and one trickster or villain god. And these two gods represent the internal and external battle of good versus evil within the heart of every individual. With the wild tales of mythology being food for the incredulous and often describing impossible happenings, this view of mythology is understandable. This interpretation of mythology, that mythology is no more than the embodiment of an individual's and society's inner struggles, is echoed in the university's Discovery Channel specials and everything in between. But there is something missing from this explanation. Gaping hole in this reasoning comes from the incredible consistencies woven into man's many creation stories. These consistencies are so numerous and remarkable that they invite the curious mind to explore them, if for no other reason than to explain the similarities away. Since the internal conflict in the hearts and minds of man can be symbolized by any implements, and since each mythology is retold in a way peculiar to that civilization, it's curious that ancient man would still tell a collective story regarding creation and history. Although Bible stories are the most well-known, especially in the West, they are not the first and they are not unique. The relationship with the serpent is indeed a strange one. The nature of the reptile is alien to our own. So humans have a natural aversion to reptiles. Humans are characterized by both the cold-blooded way of the reptile and compassionate sympathies that violate our sense of self-preservation and seem to stem from a mystical place in the soul. And if a human were forced to choose between the death of a reptile and the death of a mammal, he or she would most probably consign that serpent to death rather than the likes of a bunny rabbit. So it's quite curious that humans have for so many thousands of years revered this serpent and frequently associated it with the gods. There's hardly a single point on the globe or in history whose local population did not associate the gods with serpents and dragons. The serpent is often spoke of as the enemy of God, and in one case the Bible refers to Satan as that old serpent. Even though the whole of the Bible identifies the serpent with evil, even Jesus was heard saying, "Be as harmless as doves and as wise as serpents." The problem with this statement, taken literally, is that reptiles aren't exactly the geniuses of the animal kingdom. Warm-blooded animals are, on the average, more intelligent than reptiles. Considering the serpent to be a creature of wisdom is an interesting choice, considering that the serpent is mostly instinctual. A civilization dating back to 2500 BC allegedly also has a pantheon of gods associated with the serpent. In fact, it is nearly unheard of for an Egyptian god to be depicted without a serpent. Even the pharaohs of Egypt wore a uraeus on their headpiece. The uraeus was a serpent which symbolized the immortals. Gods of Greek mythology are likewise associated and often depicted with snakes. Meanwhile, here in the New World, the mythologies of the Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, and Native Americans is replete with serpent symbolism. Hinduism, the prevailing religion of India, is yet another religion whose gods are consistently associated with snakes. In China and the whole of the Orient, the immortal gods are connected to or described as dragons and serpents. In Islam, the serpent is associated with Satan and demons. In Voodoo, the gods are again associated with serpents. Reptile gods are seen as far east as the Pacific Islands. No matter what place or age we examine, serpents provide a central theme in that region's mythological tales. Serpents are also repeatedly associated with villains. Mythology is in fact eccentric tales created to explain creation itself. Then why so many corresponding details? If the evolutionists are right regarding the birth and evolution of humanity, then it means these stories stem from the time when man was of one blood and in one location. That was admittedly a long time ago. 15,000 years at the bare minimum, according to Reliable timelines. How and why did collective humanity cling to such stories for so long? Mythological stories are loaded with fanciful and often racy imagery, characters and storylines. The comings and goings of the gods seem more akin to the machinations of a drunk poet rather than a true record of history. It's easy to see how men like Freud came to their conclusions about mythology being nothing more than stories that symbolically represent the inner and outer struggles of the individual. There is yet another source of confusion that pervades some mythologies, and that confusion is born from multiple names and titles associated with a single god. For example, the Egyptian goddess Hathor is associated with two other goddesses, Isis and Bast. Sometimes Hathor is spoke of as the mother of Horus, which would mean Hathor and Isis were the same entity. In other cases, the title Hathor is associated with Bast, who is known to not be Isis. Also in Egyptian mythology, Ra is the sun god, but then again so is Osiris and Osiris' son Horus. All three are known as sun gods, and all three are confirmed as different beings. I suspect that the Hindus also have a wonderful grasp on what's actually happening there in the Hindu religion. Gods come upon man in the form of avatars. Vishnu, for instance, has come upon man 9 times already, meaning there are 10 gods who are all associated with a single god, Vishnu. This model could amount to a rather confusing situation if the Hindus weren't aware of the multiplicity of their gods. So not only will you find correspondences between gods and separate mythologies, but correspondences between the gods of a single mythology can also be found. I suspect that this avatar relationship with the gods explains this multiplicity. Another common habit of mythology is to describe a single god as a pair, one good and one evil. In this way, do the gods of mythology have different aspects? There is, in fact, little argument among those who study mythology that the same gods seem to make their appearances in multiple mythologies. The only argument is why this is occurring. Those university experts tend to take the extremely flawed Freudian approach. They believe that this mythological overlap is due to the natural cultural exchange that occurs between civilizations and proximity, proposing that over time to nearby civilizations will begin to absorb the traditions and gods of the other. This theory does not, however, explain how distant and unacquainted civilizations manage to acquire so many corresponding details in their traditions. A looming paradox is, according to Orthodox history, Antarctica has been frozen over for 6,000 years at the very least. Piri Reis readily admitted that his map was in fact the compilation of pre-existing maps. So how did those previous cartographers manage to accurately describe Antarctica's true shape? Beneath the surface of its ice, with Antarctica having been first discovered in 1820. Allegedly, why did these early mapmakers describe the continent of Antarctica at all? Another world map compiled by the cartographer Orontius Phineus in 1531 not only depicts Antarctica's true form beneath the ice, but it also illustrates where particular mountain ranges and rivers would be. Stranger still is the map's incredible accuracy regarding Antarctica's location relative to the southern tip of Africa and South America. Is an accurate map of Antarctica, including her location, hinterlands and true form, beneath the surface of the ice drawn up 300 years before Antarctica was supposed to have been discovered? There are other maps that include Antarctica, aside from the Reis and Phineus maps before the continent was first spotted. These maps too are admittedly compilations of far older maps. As stated earlier, making maps is no easy task. It requires surveying equipment and advanced mathematics. The bottom line is that the necessary knowledge and equipment was simply unavailable to these early cartographers. So where did the inspiration for these maps originate?